The klaxon wailed through the Celestin Starship dock like the scream of a dying star. Commander Jace Holloway pressed his back against the cold metal wall, pulse rifle gripped tight in his hands. Around him, 47 humans waited in the shadows of the maintenance corridor, their breath steady despite the chaos erupting throughout the station. "They're coming through Sector 7, whispered Lieutenant Maria Torres, her eyes fixed on the holographic display projected from her wrist unit. 200, maybe more. Jace nodded. The Vexery had chosen their moment well. The Celestin Dock was the most important trading hub in this arm of the galaxy, home to 300,000 souls and countless ships that carried goods between a dozen star systems. And now it was under attack from within. The Vexery were supposed to be allies. For 5 years, they had traded with humanity, shared technology, and sat together at diplomatic tables. Their ambassador had dined with the station commander just yesterday, smiling with those needle-thin teeth and speaking of eternal friendship. That same ambassador had ordered the attack. "Treacherous snakes," muttered Private Chen, a young man with fire in his eyes. "They waited until half our fleet was on patrol runs. That's what treachery is," Jace replied, keeping his voice calm. "They saw opportunity, and they took it. Now we take it back." The Vexery were tall, thin creatures with 4 arms and skin that shifted colors with their moods. They were faster than humans, their reflexes sharper, their senses more acute. In open combat, they held every advantage except one. They had never faced humans who were cornered. Jace pulled up the station schematic on his display. The Vexery had control of the central command hub, the main reactor control, and most of the civilian sectors. But they had made a mistake. They had left the Starship docking bays in human hands, thinking to take them last once they had secured their primary objectives. "Listen up," Jace said, addressing his small band of fighters. Most were station security, but some were dock workers, engineers, even a chef who had picked up a weapon when the Vexery started executing hostages. The Vexery think this is already over. They think we're going to surrender or run. They don't know us very well. A grim chuckle rippled through the group. "We hold these docking bays. That means we control which ships leave and which ships stay. Right now, there are 18 Vexery warships locked to our station. 18 crews waiting for the all-clear to undock and fly home as heroes." Jace allowed himself a cold smile. "They're not getting that all-clear." Lieutenant Torres brought up a tactical overlay. "The Vexery are pushing toward us from 3 directions. If we spread out to defend all approaches, they'll overwhelm us within the hour. So we don't spread out," Jace said. "We concentrate. We make them come to us through the tightest corridors we can find." He pointed at the schematic. "Maintenance tunnel, Gamma 7. It's narrow, dark, and runs right between their main force and docking bay 4. Private Chun frowned. "Sir, they're numbers. Numbers mean nothing in a tunnel so narrow that only 2 can walk side by side. They can have 1,000,000 soldiers, but only 2 can fight us at any moment." Jace looked at the faces around him. "We make our stand there. We become the wall they cannot break." The group moved through the station's underbelly like ghosts. The Vexery had shut down most of the lighting, thinking darkness would favor their superior eyes. But humans had learned to fight in darkness long before they reached the stars. They had hunted in the night of ancient Earth, learned the taste of fear and how to make others taste it too. They reached Gamma 7 and began their preparations. Engineers welded metal plates to create makeshift barriers. Dock workers rigged explosive charges at key junction points. The chef, whose name was Omar, revealed that he had once been a combat medic before he discovered his love for cooking. He set up a medical station behind the main barricade. Jay stood at the front, watching the darkness ahead. The Vexery would come soon. Their scouts had already probed the station's corridors, testing human defenses, looking for weakness. They would find no weakness here. The first wave came 20 minutes later. The Vexery moved like liquid shadows, their color-shifting skin making them almost invisible in the darkness. But humans had other senses. The sound of clawed feet on metal. The faint hiss of Vexery breathing. The smell of their pheromones, sharp and bitter. Now, Jay said. The tunnel exploded with light and fire. Humans had mounted emergency flares along the walls, and now they blazed to life, turning the darkness into blinding brilliance. The Vexery screamed, their sensitive eyes overwhelmed by the sudden illumination. Into that chaos, the humans opened fire. The first dozen Vexery fell before they understood what was happening. Their bodies piled in a narrow tunnel, creating obstacles for those behind them. The second wave tried to climb over their fallen comrades, but the humans held their ground, firing in disciplined volleys. "Reload in pairs," Lieutenant Torres commanded. "Keep the pressure on." The Vexery commander, a creature called Kexvoran, watched from a safe distance through a drone's sensors. His skin rippled with angry reds and oranges. This was not how the attack was supposed to unfold. The humans should have been scattered, panicked, easy prey. Instead, they had transformed a simple corridor into a death trap. "Send the second force through Junction 12, Kexvoran ordered. "Flank them." But when the flanking force reached Junction 12, they found it collapsed. Tons of metal and debris blocked the passage, demolished by human explosives. Kexvoran's skin shifted to a frustrated purple. "Junction 8, then. Move quickly." Junction 8 was rigged too. Not collapsed, but filled with a thick smoke that burned Vexery eyes and lungs. Human-made tear gas, synthesized in the station's chemistry lab by a human scientist who refused to let her home fall to invaders. At the main barricade, the fighting continued. Vexery bodies stacked higher and higher. The humans took casualties too. Private Chun took a plasma bolt to the shoulder and was dragged back to Omar's medical station. A dock worker named Yuki died holding the left flank, buying time for others to reinforce the position. But the line held. Hours passed. The Vexery kept coming wave after wave, and each wave broke against the human wall. Jace's arms ached from firing his weapon. His throat burned from shouting orders. But he did not move from his position at the front. "Why won't they break?" Kexvoran demanded, his skin now a deep, angry black. "They are outnumbered 10 to 1. Their position is hopeless. Why do they keep fighting?" His aide, a younger Vexery with tactical training, studied the combat data with growing unease. "They are not fighting like beings who expect to die. They are fighting like beings who expect to win." The defense had lasted 7 hours when the tide began to turn. Not at the barricade, where humans still held firm, but elsewhere in the station. The Vexery had committed most of their forces to breaking through to the docking bays, leaving their other positions thinly defended. And humans had noticed. A group of engineers had crawled through ventilation shafts to reach the main reactor control. They found only 4 Vexery guards, easily overwhelmed by a dozen angry humans armed with tools and desperation. Within minutes, they had locked out Vexery access codes and begun rerouting power. The lights came back on throughout the station. Communications, jammed since the attack began, suddenly crackled to life. And in Docking Bay 4, the 18 Vexery warships discovered that their docking clamps had been permanently sealed. Kexvoran received the news with a cold dread settling in his stomach. His skin turned pale gray, the Vexery color of fear. They had come here expecting an easy victory, a quick strike that would give them control of the most valuable station in the sector. Instead, they were trapped. The human fleet was returning. 3 battlecruisers, a dozen destroyers, and countless smaller craft, all racing back at maximum speed. They would arrive within the hour. And when they did, the Vexery forces would be caught between the returning fleet and the humans who had refused to break. "We can still take the docking bays," Kexvoran's aide suggested desperately. "Force our way through." No. Kexvoran's voice was flat. He had watched the battle data. He had seen humans fight with wounds that should have killed them, seen them hold positions that should have been impossible to defend. "We cannot break them." "We never could. The Vexery commander opened a communication channel to the human barricade. When Jace Holloway's face appeared on his screen, Kex Voren saw something that chilled him to his core. The human was bloodied, exhausted, barely standing on his feet, but his eyes burned with a fire that had not dimmed through all those hours of combat. "Human commander," Kex Voren said, forcing his skin to stay neutral gray. "I propose a ceasefire to discuss terms." Jace stared at him for a long moment. Behind him, the surviving humans stood at their positions, weapons still ready, still willing to fight. They had held the line against impossible odds, turned treachery into tactical disaster, and now the enemy was asking for mercy. "Terms," Jace repeated, his voice rough but steady. "Let me tell you about terms." He leaned closer to the camera. "Your ships don't leave. Your weapons are surrendered. Your soldiers stand down immediately. And you personally will face justice for the civilians your forces executed when this began." Kex Voren's aide hissed in outrage. "You cannot dictate terms to us. We still have thousands of soldiers. We still control most of the station." "You control nothing," Jace interrupted. "You thought you could surprise us, break us quickly before we could respond. You thought we would crumble when we saw your numbers. But you made a mistake that every enemy of humanity has made throughout our history." He stood straight despite his wounds, and in that moment, he was not one tired soldier. He was the embodiment of every human who had ever refused to surrender, every ancestor who had fought against predators in the darkness of ancient Earth, every soldier who had chosen death before dishonor. "You underestimated what we become when our backs are against the wall." The Vexery surrendered 3 hours later, just as the human fleet arrived. Their soldiers laid down their weapons in the very corridors where they had expected easy victory. Their warships were captured intact, their crews imprisoned, their dreams of conquest shattered. Jace Holloway walked through the aftermath on legs that trembled with exhaustion. The dead were being collected from both sides, the wounded treated regardless of species. The station had survived, battered but unbroken. Admiral Sarah Cross, commander of the returning fleet, found him at the barricade in Gamma 7. She looked at the piled Vexery bodies, the improvised fortifications, the handful of surviving defenders who had held this narrow corridor against an army. "Commander Holloway," she said, her voice filled with respect. "How did you hold this position?" Jace looked at his people. Lieutenant Torres, who had coordinated the defense with brilliant precision. Private Chun, arm in a sling, already asking when he could return to duty. Omar the chef, who had saved a dozen lives with skills from a career he thought he had left behind. Engineers and dock workers and civilians who had become soldiers in a moment of need. "We held it because we had no choice," Jace said. "And because we were human." The word spread across the galaxy in the weeks that followed. The Vexery had believed that treachery would give them an easy victory. They had forgotten, or perhaps had never truly understood, what humans were capable of when cornered. Other species, those who had considered humanity soft because they valued peace and trade, revised their assessments. The Celestin Dock became a symbol. Statues were erected to the defenders, their names carved in metal that would endure for centuries. But the real legacy was simpler than statues or ceremonies. It was a lesson written in the blood of those who had tried to break humanity and failed. Never corner humans. Never give them a wall to put their backs against. Never assume that because they are few, they will break easily. Because when humans are cornered, when betrayal lights a fire in their hearts, they do not surrender. They do not flee. They become something more than flesh and blood, more than tactics and weapons. They become an avatar of defiance, of courage, of the stubborn refusal to die that has carried humanity across the stars. And they will hold the line until the last breath leaves their lungs. The Vexery learned this truth in the dark corridors of the Celestin Dock. They paid for that education with blood. And in the centuries that followed, their shame became humanity's glory, A story told across 1,000 worlds about the species that turned treachery into triumph and taught the galaxy what it truly meant to underestimate the children of Earth.